Hey, this is Sanyam Bhutani, and you're listening to Chai Time Data Science, a podcast for data science enthusiasts where I interview practitioners, researchers, and Kagglers about their journey, experience, and talk all things about data science. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Chai Time Data Science Show. In this episode, I interview Kaggle Grandmaster Mikel, also known as Anokas on Kaggle. And if you're from any Slack community where Mikel is active on, you might have seen him with the same username. In this interview, I try to decipher for the second time if Mikel is a robot AGI or not, which I again fail at. But do check out the previous interview. It will be linked in the description of this podcast, where I was fortunate enough to interview him on my blog series earlier. In this interview, we talk all about Mikel's journey into Kaggle, machine learning, and his current life where he's a computer science student at the University of Cambridge. Yes, he's 18 years old at the time of publishing this interview. Mikel was one of the youngest person to become Kaggle Grandmaster in the competitions tier, I believe, at the age of 17. He was also the first person, I believe, to become Kaggle Triple Master back when there were 3 tiers. For the audience, the datasets tier was recently introduced on Kaggle, and earlier there were just 3 tiers. We talk all about how Mikel went on Kaggling at the age of 14, how he continued to learn, continued to improve his score on the leaderboard, his positions on the leaderboard, and his journey into Kaggle, into machine learning, into even machine learning research, where he led to working on very interesting projects in the intersection of machine learning and Japanese literature. Also, where he ended up organizing a Kaggle competition, which we also talk about in this interview. I'm sure that Mikel is definitely one of the youngest and smartest persons I've had on the series for the second time. So I really enjoyed this conversation. A reminder to the non-native English-speaking audience, the subtitles on YouTube will be manually checked and re-uploaded. So please enable them for a better experience. And the blog for this interview, along with all of the Chai Time Data Science interviews, will be released later. So you can also find the links to where these will be posted in case you want to read the previous or the future interviews. Without further ado, here's my interview with Kaggle's still youngest Kaggle Grandmaster, Mikel, also known as Anokas on Kaggle. Please enjoy the show. Hi everyone, I am on the call with a robot or AGI, or I'm not sure if it's a proxy. Mikel, thank you so much for joining me on the Chai Time Data Science podcast.
Hi, thanks a lot for having me. It's great to finally be here.
We were just chatting about this, but you know very well that I've been a fan of yours. So it's again a privilege to have you, or I don't know if it's a proxy of yours on the show.
I say it's me, but I guess that's what someone else would say. So you would just have to trust me on this one.
I guess you passed the Turing test in that case.
Yeah, you would decide at the end.
Okay. For the listeners, can you tell us your current age and the age at which you became a Kaggle Grandmaster?
So I'm 18 now. So I started Kaggling when I was like 14, I think. Mm-hmm. And I managed to reach Grandmaster last year, so I was 17.
And Ahmed wants to confirm, is it still illegal to team up with you? Would that be child labor?
Thankfully not, no. I'll admit I've never looked into child labor laws, but I'm pretty sure that everyone I've teamed with is fine.
Okay. No more jokes.
Fair enough.
In our previous interview, you had mentioned you picked up Kaggle because you initially were drawn to the competitive aspect of it. Mm-hmm. Were you always competitive? Any place outside of Kaggle at the age of 14 that you were involved in?
I guess like not that much. I didn't really see myself as a very competitive person. I think what made Kaggle so addictive is that so I would always do as often people do. I had like lots of various personal projects and stuff. Like I would build stuff for fun, right? And with machine learning, it was like cool. I get to build stuff for fun, but then it's actually like contributing. Like it's actually on a leaderboard somewhere. It's not like right. I build something and then it like goes in the folder somewhere. It goes on the shelf and like I never touch it again. So like the feedback loop of having the leaderboard and like having like goals to reach, I think it makes it much easier to stick to something. Because I was always someone who, and I think still am someone who like wants to do lots of things, but then I will only like do something for a few months, and then I'll get bored of it. And I always thought that would be the case with Kaggle. So I was always thinking like, oh, is this what like because I sometimes there'll be breaks where I wouldn't do it for a few months, and I was like, oh, is this it? Am I like moving on to something else now? But so far, I think just the competitive aspect and the community and everything has sort of kept me in this. It's sort of I've stuck to it.
At what point did you realize that machine learning is your long-term passion, something that you'd like to pursue for the longer term?
I don't know. To be honest, I still can't say that for sure. I still think that like, one day I'm gonna just be bored of it and I'm gonna do something else. But then it's like, well, now I have this like Kaggle profile and I have all of this and it's got me into so many different opportunities. And so I'm thinking like, well, can I leave it behind if I want to? Like, can I leave so much behind? So there's a bit of pressure on myself to like keep going as a result of that. But I don't know. I think I still enjoy it, and I hope that like I can stay on this path.
Fair enough. And I'm really curious about your methodology. In our previous interview, you again mentioned that you didn't go up and take any courses or you didn't pursue any books. You didn't read any books from cover to cover. You followed the top-down approach. Can you speak more about it? What was your method when starting out?
Yeah. I mean, like the question I most often get asked by people is like, oh, well, how do you get started with Kaggle and so on? And I hate this question because I haven't got a good answer to it, and I wish I did, because probably 50% of the questions I get asked is like, oh, what course should I do? So on. Like I should preface this by saying that like Kaggle today, the competitions are really different to how they were 3, 4 years ago. I think it's a lot harder now. Definitely a lot harder to get started because you have back then everything was you have some tabular data set, binary classification, whatever. You stick it in XGBoost and like almost the same code would work for like across several competitions. But now you get these it's so complicated. You have to get neural networks to work, and you've got these massive data sets and so on. So I think it was a lot easier to like break in like with the approach that I took back then, which is a bit of a shame, I think. But basically, I started. I just sort of stumbled across Kaggle. Like I didn't know really what it was, but I was like, oh, cool. So I signed up, and I got these leaderboards, and I really kind of just started by so we already had kernels back then.
Okay.
So I didn't know what I was doing, to be honest. I didn't know how to code. So I had learned Python a couple of years prior, but I had never really used
Okay.
it. It's sort of like I did like an online course on it, but then I forgot it. So I did not know what I was doing categorically, but there was kernels, and I could just copy paste the code and run it, and it would get me somewhere on the leaderboard. And I could take multiple of these kernels, and I could open up the submission files in Excel, average them, and I would get a better score. So that's basically, I just started essentially as a script kiddie, just downloading other people's code, running it. I would tweak parameters and like in like XGBoost or whatever. And like over time, I would start to like, oh, here's like an idea I have, like, let's try it. And so basically just doing that. And then like the other thing is before I sort of re-taught myself how to code, I started by using in the first few competitions programs like K9 and RapidMiner and like these sorts of like GUI machine learning tools. And like the results weren't great, like in terms of like if you compare to even sklearn or something.
Back in the
But
day.
it's easy to use, right? And you have and it teaches you the concepts because you get the data, you have to split cross validation, you run some tree model, perhaps you run several of them, you average them, and so on. So it really like got me comfortable. And so for the first few, like several competitions, that's what I did.
Okay.
And I would like stay up all night doing that. Just honestly, just like running other people's code, even in R as well. Because the back then people used R quite a bit as well. And yeah, it's just sort of progressed gradually. I just kept going at it because I found it so fun to actually like, oh, I could, because I'd say quite easily get into like top 20% or so because most of the people that do a Kaggle competition, like most of the competitors, are they join, they like do one thing, they like submit sample submission,
Yeah.
and that's it. So in a way, the leaderboard scores are like quite inflated in that like minimal effort will definitely get you top 50%, right? So you can sort of do that. And I guess where that really changed was the Avito duplicate ads competition, which was the
Okay.
first competition I did well in. And basically, what happened there was that so to give a bit of background about the competition, basically what you had to do is you were given a bunch of listings from a website called Avito, which is a bit like a Russian version of eBay, I'm told.
Okay.
And so you're given two listings, and you have to check. You have to say, are they duplicates? So you had text data, you had metadata, you had images. This was back when there weren't really images on Kaggle. That wasn't really a thing.
Yeah.
So there were loads of people, like this was the beginning of the competition. I started as soon as it started, and people were building stuff based on text features, right? And but no one was using images in the first couple of days. But I quickly wrote up something which basically just hashed all the images, and I created a new feature which was like, are these the same image? Like, do they have the same image, these two listings? Which is obviously quite a powerful feature. But as the first person to actually process all the images, because it was like 100 gigs or something, I ended up number one on the leaderboard, which I remember was like a really huge thing for me. And then I made the great decision of teaming, which is the first time I've teamed with second and third place on the leaderboard at that time. And that competition was really just such a huge learning opportunity that like was like the stepping stone from like beginner to like I know what I'm doing. And then towards the end of the competition, we invited Casanova Marius to join us because he had just started the competition. He was quite low down, but we were like, well, maybe he wants to team with us, and he did. So there was like my first team had, I think he was third or second in the world at the time. And so that was like all this Kaggle knowledge bestowed on me basically. And I think that's basically how I got into it. I don't know how viable it is today, given like the current sort of climate of competitions.
Yeah.
I do hope, I don't know, because now the field has progressed and it's sort of anyone can like run models on tabular data. So sponsors aren't really interested in it anymore. Sponsors, they want their image or their text problem solved, and now everyone uses neural networks. And I think it's a bit of a shame because it takes away all this old feature engineering aspect of the old competitions.
Yeah.
So it's definitely different trying to do competitions on Kaggle today, I would say.
Okay. And how did you continue improving your approach? Again, I don't think you took any courses while you were active as well. How did you learn new things? How did you go out and figure what are neural nets? What is
Yeah.
scikit-learn?
Um, just like Googling as necessary, I think. So there's a lot of stuff I discovered by trial and error, and I think that's why I have a pretty good intuition of like what might work or what won't. And I think that's just because I didn't go about reading like taking notes like okay, this model is good for this model is good for this. I tried them all on all these different competitions, and now I have an understanding of like I have a good feeling this will work or like this won't work. And I think it's just a lot of people are quite scared to get started because I people have told me like, oh, I don't know if I'm good enough to start Kaggle yet. Like, and I'm just there like, well, there's no like entry exam, right? There's no there's no risk. Just try it and do whatever you can and you will learn from it. I feel like the approach of like, oh, before I touch Kaggle, I have to do all these books and courses and stuff. I don't think that's the right approach at all. Um, Basically.
I'm definitely. I think I'd like to call myself a self-made fast evangelist, where they really promote this idea of the top-down learning. Go out, do
Yeah, yeah,
and do
yeah,
whatever
yeah.
you want. So it's great to know like this technique definitely works, and this is one message I always try to get across to the audience, that you need to do more than you need to learn, especially for machine learning.
Yeah, I agree. I think one thing I quite like about it is I've never been that strong on theory in general, like with maths and all these other things. And I think people often take the wrong approach to machine learning and thinking that like it's in the practical sense, it's like super like theory based, but it's really not. It's all about like how sort of getting the intuitions. It's all about getting the intuitions and not about understanding equations. So I think that's like why it worked so well for me when like I could never do like a maths Olympiad or anything like that. Right.
Yeah,
I think it's quite a different thing. And that's good. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
What was your life like when you were active in Gaggle? You were in school. How many times did your parents walk up to your room late in the night and you're sitting in a corner working on some script in the dark?
That was quite common. I did have quite a lot of time to work on Kaggle, and like I would end up sort of work on it constantly.
Okay,
Like I would get up and I would always have something running, and like every few hours I'd check in. I'd always be SSHing from my phone
okay.
and literally sometimes writing code on my phone for Kaggle
Interesting.
Competition. So it was like always a part of like my day and my life at time, and it was a lot of fun. And my friends are very interested in it and always follow me on the leaderboards and stuff. So it was a really great experience being able to do that while at school.
And you still hold the title of becoming the youngest Kaggle Grandmaster. Are you worried someone might become aware of Kaggle at the age of 10 and might snatch your title?
Uh, yes, I do. There are a few people I know who are quite young on Kaggle, close to my age. Thankfully, none of them have taken my place yet. But it's quite cool to see that like I'm not the only one doing this. There are definitely quite a few teenagers on Kaggle, and there are a few that are quite high up on the leaderboards, and that's really cool. I'm holding on to it for now, but then obviously like I'm I will age, so eventually I won't be the youngest grandmaster. I have to find some other gimmick.
Speaking about competitions, do you have any favorite battle stories, any favorite competitions that you'd like to mention? And once you became used to Kaggle, what would your pipeline look like once you enter the competition? Because I remember whenever you used to enter a competition, you'd sit on the top of the leaderboard with a huge gap to mention
Yeah,
that would take at least a month sometimes to come over.
yeah. I think. I mean, like the first question is like about like battles. I think there have been several.
Mhm.
First, first one, of course, Avito. Um, so there was we were in first place for a long time battling. We really like the final week was massive, and I remember being at school and working on it and stuff. Um, but in the last like couple hours of the competition, one of the teams they were like in seventh jumped up above us, so we ended up second. And they had been hiding their solution for about a week. They had been making fake submissions to make
Okay.
it seem like they weren't as good as they were. So they really like overtook us. And then I guess another similar case is the competition which I won, which was the Google Landmark Retrieval Competition.
Yeah.
There was interesting competition in many ways, very unusual. But we had managed to get in first, and we were staying in first for a long time. But the last couple of weeks, we were unable to make any progress. We were completely stuck, and we were working really hard because there was the second place team was catching up quickly. And just before the competition ends, the organizers announced they're extending the competition by a week, which was incredibly frustrating because, well, I mean, I had basically not been sleeping the last couple of days because I thought that this is the end, and it's like actually you've only done half the marathon. Basically,
Yeah.
please keep running. Um, but it was really so devastating almost, and like I wrote some angry messages on the forums. Um, but like that was quite a battle, and in the end, like the last day, they overtook us
Okay.
again on the public leaderboard. But then thankfully on the private leaderboard, we won, and like by quite a significant margin. So that was like really good to see. And this competition was like one that I'm particularly proud of, because our approach, we didn't we didn't use the training data at all. We didn't have any validation. We had so there was an image of it was a competition of basically given a landmark, find all the other images in the data set of the same landmark. And there was another competition along with it which was like landmark classification. So they had a bunch of pictures of landmarks and each had an ID. So from that you could use that as a data set, as a training set, right? Because you could say, well, this landmark we want to surface all the other landmarks with the same ID. This is something that like me and my teammates had been working on for quite some time. And so we already had like a pipeline for a lot of it. We already had trained models, which basically took an image and we got a vector. And we just used the stuff we already had and we built extra stuff on top of it. So we built some fast nearest neighbor code and stuff like that. But like what ended up happening is that we didn't actually train any models for that competition. Our models were like generic for like detecting just objects and images. So I think that's what made it like really robust, and like I was really proud of our solution just because it's weird to win a Kaggle competition without any training or validation. But no, that was a fun battle.
I'll definitely have the solution linked in the description. I remember when you
Yeah.
had published it, everyone became a huge fan of it, and it was on all of Kaggle's forums, Slack groups, all over the place because it was a delight to read. Talking about your approach when you join a competition, can you speak more about that, and how do you manage
Yeah.
to get to the top of the leaderboard instantly?
Yeah, my competition, other people were like, right, I've got this approach. I'm gonna like read all about it and I'm gonna download the data. I'm gonna set up my script and so on. That is not what I do. The competition launches, I immediately download the data, and while the data is downloading, I start writing a script.
Okay.
And basically, my approach is always try and get a baseline as quickly as possible. So I will write like just a simple, in the past was an XGBoost script, but now I guess it's harder with the newer competitions to just have a baseline. But often you'll use hacks, just like train a model on the image size, instead of actually detecting what's in the image. So like I would try and build like something really simple, and that will get me first on the leaderboard, hopefully for a few days. And I guess like I would say that like that's some good strategy for some reason, but it's really that just like I like being on the top of the leaderboard.
And then you would tweet it's lonely at the top along every time you get to the top of the leaderboard.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Kaggle has these like it has like a button to tweet, but it always has these like really boasty passive aggressive tweets, and I just hope that people understand that it's not like me saying that. Those were the suggested tweets. Yes. But yeah, and like I just try and get like a baseline submission, and then like I'll keep iterating on it, and I'll spend like many hours just trying to improve, and that will get me like a baseline understanding. Like I get a feel for the data, and then I can go away and then think of ideas and stuff. And like a lot of the time, I will only do a competition at the beginning, and then it'll sort of fizzle out. Usually because I'm just not sure what to do well. But like a lot of the time, like when I do well in competitions, I have this like really hacky solution that I've kept adding stuff to, and then at a certain point, like after a while, I will rewrite it. Once I know what my solution is going to look like, then I rewrite it nicely. But I just don't see like either I'm too like lazy or impatient, or just I don't think there's that much benefit to setting up a pipeline as the first thing you do in a competition. So that's basically how I try and get to the top at the very beginning of all the competitions.
Talking about hardware, I remember in Kaggle Noobs, you had posted a picture where you had around 50 1080 Ti's, if I remember correctly. How do you justify your carbon footprint, and what hardware do you recommend for people who feel intimidated by that?
Yeah, I quite like hardware. I quite like posting photos of hardware. I don't actually have, that's not my hardware, to clarify. So I will help people build servers. And so I will buy all the parts and I will build servers and stuff for other people. And so often like I will take a photo of all these GPU boxes that I have. But like, yeah, I guess if you buy like a server from like Dell, or if you buy like, I guess the initial thing was back when NVIDIA released, back when they released what was it? It was like, I can't remember the name of it, but it was this workstation with 4 Titans.
DGX?
Like, no, way back when they were first doing neural networks, back when Torch was popular. Not PyTorch, Torch.
I wasn't in machine learning. I was all the time then.
So they just released. It was just consumer parts. It was just a standard consumer case, Corsair case with 4 original Titans in it, and they were charging like 25,000, and there was like a big waiting list. And so my dad's company was like, actually, we kind of want one, and I was like, actually, the parts, they're not 25,000, they're 5,000. So if you buy the parts, I will build it for you. And that's what we did, and it was a success. And it sort of just went from there. So like, I really like building computers, and I know lots of other people, they don't like interfacing with hardware. So they'll like use different tools like to abstract all their code. Yep. They'll use like different deployment tools, or like there's like Neptune.ml and stuff, or Docker. But I find it really frustrating. I like setting up my environment on the hardware, and that's my environment, and I use it for everything. And so I've always really liked building computers. and working with hardware directly, and so on. So I guess my sort of photos of hardware that comes from that. I have in my computer, I have one Titan X.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's my personal computer. But yeah, it's I the upside is that I get to like borrow and use lots of other people's stuff, and that's definitely helped for competitions.
What recommendations do you have for people looking at the current climate of Kaggle?
In terms of hardware,
Yes.
I guess GPU, right, is the first thing, because you need to participate in all those image competitions. So I guess I don't really I'm not a huge fan of the latest generation of NVIDIA cards, the 20 series. They're quite expensive in that the price is being artificially hiked because they can. So I don't like recommending it, but I feel like if you can afford it, then get a 2080 Ti. I think that makes the most sense at the moment, and I'm hoping that the AMD can come out with some stuff to help bring down NVIDIA's prices. But I guess the other thing is like on the CPU side, I would say get Ryzen for sure. There's just the value proposition is so huge compared to Intel, and I like supporting the underdog. So I would recommend, yeah, Ryzen 2080 Ti. If you can find one, a 1080 Ti, because it's like half the price for like 75% of the performance. So it's a no-brainer.
I'd like to drop a quick plug. I've interviewed Tim Detmers on the series, who has a very nice blog on GPUs, and we also talk about that. So do check that interview out in case you haven't. Now, zooming out to another aspect of your profile, you're also a published researcher. Can you tell us about your research interest and what led you to working in research as well?
So I guess it started of I did some work with the University of Surrey on some Kaggle competition. So it started with the YouTube A10 competition and then the Google Landmark competition. And so the researchers that I worked with, they were like, okay, well, we want to publish a paper based on things. I was like, amazing. Actually, the YouTube A10 competition was built. There was a workshop at CVPR built around that. So we were like, okay, let's put something in the workshop. So I was like, cool. Like, I don't know how it works, but like, I'll help out. So I did. And so in the end, I ended up going to Hawaii, CVPR. It's my first time going to the US. And I ended up presenting our paper there, which was like such a huge thing. It's on YouTube. I was like 16 at the time, I think. And it was such a surreal experience. It was such an enjoyable one. And it's so, I think like being able to do research is such a rewarding thing to like have your name up there, and also like if someone else like cites your paper, you go and read it and you're like, wow, somebody who actually knows what they're doing read my paper and like it in some way guided their thoughts or whatever. And that's such a cool thing. And since then I've been like looking for opportunities. So I've done a bunch more work with the University of Surrey as I'm going, and then like with CADH as I'm sure you'll bring up, and so on. So it's like it's a lot of fun, and it's a very rewarding thing, just like Kaggle is, to have that opportunity, which I know is not everyone has, especially before university.
I remember there was another interesting story, I think, where you had a school deadline and you almost submitted the paper at the last day for CVPR.
Yeah, no, this is a common story. So like the latest competition I did, which was the third YouTube A10 competition, we did quite well there, and we won a prize, and we were like, they were like, okay, so we have to submit a paper. I had just arrived in Cambridge when this happened. This was like first week of Cambridge term, and we had 3 days to write a paper. So that was quite a that was quite a challenge, and it didn't end up being as good as I wanted it to, obviously. But honestly, and like the amount of like stuff I have to do here at university compared to like how this year was at school is like a completely other level, and I'm still
Interesting.
trying to figure out how to basically mix and match all these things and how to make time for it. So it does happen that like all these Kaggle deadlines and like the landmark competition that got delayed, it then coincided with like an exam I had and stuff. So it's awful, but somehow I managed to work around it.
I'll definitely have your talk from CVPR linked in case anyone wants to go ahead and check it out.
Sure.
Now, could you tell us more about the importance of your work in Japanese literature that I think you've worked along with Taran and David Ha, also known as Hardmaru on Twitter?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've been working for the last, I guess, year and a half with CODH, which is like a Japanese research organization. In their work in open data from humanities, and I think it's such a cool thing. Like I don't have any background in Japanese literature, so it's not like I really wanted to go into Japanese literature, but it was
I'm sorry,
like, wow.
do you speak Japanese? Because I think you speak 4 languages, Polish, English, and 2 more. Do you speak Japanese or
I
like?
don't speak Japanese. I'd like to, especially so I actually can like read some of the output that we generate. But no, I basically just speak English fluently, but I speak Polish, Spanish, and Basque. Sort of, I can hold a conversation.
Okay.
So yeah, I'd love to speak Japanese, but I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, what was I saying? So yeah, there was nothing like, oh, I want to do Japanese literature, but it was like, here's an opportunity, and I knew Taryn from before then, and so she was like, well, do you want to like help us out and work on this? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I just think it's so rewarding to be able to like put, because when you publish a paper, it's like, okay, I've done something, I've built a model, and it's online, but like no one's ever going to like actually use it. It doesn't actually get used by anyone.
Yeah.
It's research, right? It's just yeah. But then like actually being able to like build something that will one day be used for something. So like our end goal is to be able to sort of take all of these millions of books and stuff that have been written in ancient like cursive Japanese. And the thing is that most people in Japan today can't read it, can't read any of these historical documents. And there are only like a handful of experts, but you have you have millions of books. So these books are never going to be transcribed into modern Japanese by people. There's just too much of them. And so like our goal is to be able to sort of automate it. And then we'll be able to basically take these like millions of books and put them all online, all the transcriptions in modern Japanese. And it's sort of just thinking about it, like it opens up so many cool things, like even like linguistic analysis. Because if you have all the books over time, you can see how did the language change and all of these things. And I just think that like being able to put my skills in some respect in something like concrete, and hopefully something that will actually benefit society in some way is like a huge motivator. And so I'm really like happy that I get to work on Japanese literature.
We sure it will. You also ended up hosting a competition on Kaggle. What led you to hosting the competition? What parts were you involved in? And were you not frustrated by the fact that you can't go ahead on the leaderboard and be on the first position?
Yeah, so the competition, there was like a big story about the competition. So like my part was mainly data preparation, building like the data set and the train test split and stuff along with Taryn, and also um, basically talking to Kaggle and setting up the competition and deciding what we're going to do. And so I don't think this has been spoken about publicly before, but we had a bit of a problem, which is that basically the competition was you have we give you pages with cursive writing on them, and you have to like identify like where the characters are and what the characters are. So you have to like classify object detection basically. The problem is that like these were books that it cost a lot of money basically to get these transcribed. So the data we had was the data we had, and these were like transcriptions that we had obtained for other projects, and then we like let's repurpose as a Kaggle competition. So the issue we had was that some of the books had been transcribed before, not in the sense of like our competition format where it was like object detection, but in the sense that there was a transcription like in another format of the same book. And often there would be liberties taken in translation, right? So you change words around. This wouldn't be a literal like letter for letter translation like ours was. But the bottom line was that there was some element of like leakage potentially. Someone could it wouldn't be easy, but someone could find somehow these books and like it would take several steps to even find it, and then several steps to build a model that you could actually use the information you find. So it was like really wouldn't be easy. So I didn't think that cheating using it would be a problem at all. But in the end, it was because of that we sort of had to sort of downscale the competition. So we ended up with a playground competition, just because we couldn't risk cheating. So we took that decision. And at the time, I didn't think it was, I didn't think there would be that much of an issue. Like I thought that we were overreacting. But recently, of course, we've all seen the issues around cheating in the Pet Finder competition. And so that was like someone made a really concerted effort to cheat in that competition. And so if I compare that to like how difficult it would have been to cheat in ours, it seemed feasible that like they would have done the same in ours. So like I do think it's quite important. It's getting quite important to like really stop leakage like that. And that was like a big pain point of the competition. And things were still like moving last minute. And because Kaggle actually, we weren't aware that some of this data was online, and like Kaggle found it for us. And so like we had to put the brakes on a lot of things and cancel the press release last minute and all of these things, right? It was like crazy. But like behind the scenes, like I don't know how much I can say, but it was like a lot of drama as a result of this. And like all I can say is that it's becoming so important now. I guess Kaggle is sort of entering a mainstream, and we never saw this sort of cheating in the past. Even like a couple of years ago, there was like the talking data competition, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but basically the ID like column was correlated with the target. Things that were later in like the data set were more likely to like have a positive outcome.
Okay.
And like today, this would last like 10 minutes before someone finds it, because people try and find leakage like this. But back then, literally, it wasn't found until the last week of the competition.
Interesting.
It had been like 2 months. I think that shows like how much it's changed. People are like really trying to find leakage, and like some people are motivated to cheat. And I think that in some ways is new on Kaggle.
Yeah. Now, zooming out to what you are currently doing, I don't know why even you are going to university, but you are at the University of Cambridge studying computer science. Can you please tell us why do you even need to do that?
Yeah. I get people tell me that a lot, but like I think what I mentioned earlier was that like I've never been good at the theory side of computer science and so on. And the course here at Cambridge is like a really theoretical course, a lot of maths and so on. And I find that quite challenging. So I don't feel that like I'm above everyone else here. And of course, like it's Cambridge, so there are like everyone here is really good. But I definitely don't feel that I am like at the top of the pack either. I mean, like I guess the exception is like right now we're now doing a machine learning module, which I think you saw. And to be honest, like it's a bit disappointing because the issue frankly about Cambridge being so theoretical is that like in some respects the courses are quite far behind like real life. So to speak, I might anger some people by saying that, but it's like at least in like the machine learning course, it's like sentiment classification using naive Bayes.
Since I have graduated from college, I'll confirm that is very true to colleges even today.
Yeah.
Outside of Cambridge, at least.
Yeah. So it's like there's no like mention of neural networks. There's nothing. And I've already done a few things, but like soon we'll have a lecture on cross validation and stuff. And I know like I haven't been there, but I know it's gonna piss me off because it's gonna be like it's one of those topics where there's no like accepted like this is the best way to do it. And I think Kaggle has made a lot of progress in the sense of everything on Kaggle is the best techniques from Kaggle because they're all battle tested.
Yes.
So I feel like that's what makes it so like useful. And I have a feeling that like the stuff we get taught in Cambridge won't hold up. Like it wouldn't hold up on Kaggle, for example, on like on real world data.
Do you feel like you're an undercover superhero situation, such as like you're Spider-Man? As soon as the faculty pull out your phone, you run scripts on your phone, and as soon as they turn back, you're back to writing code on paper.
I mean, like, luckily we are allowed to like use computers and stuff and lectures and stuff as well. But like our exams at the end of the year, we have to write code on paper, which is horrifying to me. I don't know how I'm gonna manage. But I guess like in the machine learning lectures, like some people and most people don't know that I like do a lot of machine learning. So, but like some people know, and so they do like look at me like, dude, this must be easy for you. And I'm like, yeah. But that's like it's just certain topics. It's just the machine learning side, and I still think that I have a lot to learn in other areas of computer science.
I think you're being humble here, but talking about your future aspirations, Aaron and at _ anti _ not _ from Twitter asked this question: what future job would you like to apply or work on?
I don't know yet. I think in some ways I like let myself off not thinking about it because I have time to think about it. But like I feel like at the moment I would love to just do something in applied machine learning, like industry, but where I can actually see results. So like I love the work with CODH because we're actually working towards this goal, and like when it materializes, hopefully it will like be like, wow, I made this. But there's stuff like self-driving cars and this sort of stuff where it's like, you write code and stuff, and then a car moves. It's sort of this connection that makes it really, really cool. So I'd love, I think, to work in some applied machine learning thing. And like, I don't want to narrow my options. Basically, how do I say it? So like,
You open
I
to all
want,
opportunities.
yeah, exactly. I don't really care, like in some ways. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, I only want to do this, right? The only thing I would say is that like I want to take like ethical considerations into account. So there are like, for example, like take something like Boston Dynamics. It's like they make really cool robots. Like I would love to work on robots like that, but I know that whatever robot I build will eventually be used to probably kill someone. So unfortunately, like I probably wouldn't work on something like that. So I think there is a sort of duty that like whenever I work on something, like is this actually a good thing to build?
Yeah.
I do think I have to think about that.
I think self-driving cars still have been a huge milestone in your journey. You were
Yeah.
one of the first people in the nano degree that Udacity has, and I think you've also interned at Voyage.
Yeah, I did like a work experience, like informally, for a few days at Voyage, a couple of years ago, and that was like a really fantastic experience. And so yeah, I would love to do that again.
Interesting. Now, again, a question from the AMA. I'm sure I'll have your ML Crate repository linked in the description, but what frustrates you most about today's machine learning tooling, and why did you create ML Crate in the first place?
Yeah. So ML Crate is like is my sort of machine learning library. And what it basically is that it's not designed to solve any specific problem, but when I get frustrated with someone else's library and like I rewrite a function or whatever, I will put it in my library. And then the nice thing is that it's sort of available. I can easily install it, and it's on Kaggle kernels and stuff, so I can sort of use it. I guess what frustrates me most is probably lack of good documentation. So I think a good example of this is the Fast AI library. So it's a really great library. Like it's got, in the sense that it's really powerful and it's got a lot of cool features.
Yep.
And I would love to figure out how to use it, but so far I've really struggled. I've apparently, like, the only way to understand it is to go through the videos and watch them.
Yep.
So it's not really documented. You just have to sort of know how it works, and I don't like that. And like it has a very prescribed way of doing things. So it's like, oh, you've got to use like a data bunch and all these things.
Yep.
And it's like, no, I just want you to do training. I want to handle the data myself. And FastAI is like, no, you must use data bunch. So it's this frustrating thing that makes me go, okay, fine, you know what, I'm going to rewrite the code myself. And that's partly like a stubbornness of like, I don't want to like conform my code to how this like one library wants me to write it. Like I want to write it this way. So I guess I'm trying to think of like other examples. But I find like the lack of documentation quite frustrating in some respects. And also I guess like scikit-learn like has this like pipelines thing, right?
Yes.
So some people like that, like, and I don't like that, and that's a personal preference thing. But I guess it just highlights I don't like being prescribed like this is how it's going to work by a specific package. I prefer to like use a package. Okay, I give it this, I get out this data. Okay, now what am I going to use next? Like I can use one of many packages. I don't like basically being forced to use someone else's pipeline.
Got it. So my final question in the area of data science to you would be, what best advice do you have for someone who's looking to snatch your title, becoming the youngest future Kaggle Grandmaster?
Ooh, I guess, I mean, people often ask me, how do you get started? And like I've said, the competitions nowadays are very different to how they were 3 or 4 years ago. I guess I often recommend people go and do previous older competitions. So nowadays, they're really not that nice to get started on. So I will say I will often recommend like competitions that I did when I was getting started, like, hey, download this tabular data and try this out, look at the kernels and so on. It's not the same, obviously, to do an old competition, but it's a nice way to sort of practice. But I guess what I would say is that you just have to sort of keep doing it, and hopefully you enjoy it. So if it hopefully it's you find something that's fun, and that sort of creates a loop of you end up learning it without actually like trying really hard to force yourself to learn it. But I guess if someone's asking that question and they're sort of motivated to learn Kaggle and machine learning and all these things, then I don't think that'll be a problem. And I think that applies to most things, not just to Kaggle.
And you definitely don't need a master's. You definitely don't need a PhD. Even a bachelor.
No.
Start this in school itself.
Yeah. You don't need, I don't know about other computer science disciplines, but like, as I said, right, Kaggle is so applied and getting your hands dirty, and you don't need to know the equations. You don't need to understand the equations. You just need to have an intuition for it. And I think that lends itself really well to people without formal degrees and so on, without having been through this rigid, structured approach in universities and colleges and so on.
Yeah. So this will be a tricky question. I really enjoyed asking this with Jiba, but what would be your favorite computer game of all time? I know you're a gaming fan as well, a gaming nerd.
Yeah, my all-time favorite. I honorable mention to Minecraft. Okay. Obviously because I've spent thousands and thousands of hours in Minecraft, and
You're a hacker.
Yeah, I started playing it like a good 10 years ago. I played it more than anything else for sure. I think the game I've enjoyed most, and I guess my favorite game overall, is a game called Nier Automata. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I haven't.
But it's this quite well-known Japanese open world RPG. And I don't know why I enjoyed it so much, but I really loved the story. And I keep every now and again I'll think like, oh, I really want another game. I want to play that again. Yeah. So I guess that would have to be my all-time favorite game.
Okay. Now my final question. Can you reveal your secret behind the name Anokas on Kaggle? I think it's a username also everywhere.
Yeah, it is. I'm gonna say no, I can't. The truth, like, it's a really boring origin story, so I keep it shrouded in mystery, and everyone asks me this, and I always refuse to answer. So
we'll try to get you on the show again to reveal it. But thank you so much, Mikel, for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me over. And yeah, I hope I see you soon again.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to give it a review, or feel free to shoot me a message. You can find all of the social media links in the description. If you like the show, please subscribe and tune in each week to Chai Time Data Science.